Okay, we're live. Welcome, everyone, to our SCBWI SoCal panel for Paranormal YA. And we have a fantastic group of authors here with us today, and we're very excited for the panel. Before we begin, just to remind you that if you would like to comment or participate in the raffle, you'll need to sign into YouTube so that we will get your comments and answers to the raffle questions. Just to quickly introduce the team that we've got here today for behind the scenes of this panel. We've got running all the tech behind the scenes. We've got Ernesto Cisneros, who is the author of Effort Divided. And I'm not going to say too much about him, only because I'm afraid he might kick me off of the screen because if we praise him too much. But the very highly regarded and well awarded, I guess you could say, Effort Divided. So Ernesto, thank you so much for doing this. And we are grateful and we're very proud that you're part of our chapter. Also behind the scenes, who we'll see for a little bit, is our regional advisor, Tim Burke, who this is actually his brainchild to put together a panel for authors with either recent or upcoming novels this in 2021. So when he's not correcting the punctuation of skywriters, Tim writes middle grade and young adult fiction, even though Paid Off Witnesses will insist that his stories are true. He's the regional advisor of the SoCal chapter of SCBWI, with more emphasis on the first description and more questions on the latter. Plans for a still decades away centennial include a possibly brief showcase of any lingering ice hockey skills he may still have, followed by a concert of his much lauded original emetic tunes. So you can wander over to his website at timburketales.com to see more about him. And we will see him when it is time for the raffle. As for myself, my name is E.L. Tenenbaum, and I am an author of young adult fiction, including the Sapphire Legend duology, Standalone Silhouettes, and the End of Ever After 5-book companion series. I'm also the producer and co-host of Oh My Word podcast, which reviews the content of books, musicals, entertainment, all sort of things, content, not quality, and also includes bonus episodes featuring all kinds of people from the book world. So with that, let us go straight to our authors, beginning with Marlene Perez. Marlene is the author of paranormal and urban fantasy books, including the best-selling Dead Is series for teens. The first book in the series, Dead Is the New Black, was named for an ALA quick pick for reluctant young adult readers, as well as an ALA popular paperback. Dead Is Just a Rumor was on Voya's 2011 Best Science Fiction, Horror, and Fantasy list. Her novels have been featured in Girls Life, 17, and Cosmopolitan. You can visit her online at marleneperez.com. So Marlene has a book that just came out, and then she also has a new book that's coming out in September, and that's part of the October, which is part of her new trilogy. So Marlene, please tell us about your new series.
The first book in this series is The Afterlife of the Party. Let's see that, which has a fabulous cover. And it's the first of the teen vampire trilogy. And it takes place in Southern California. It's about a girl who goes to a party with her friend Skylar and her friend Vaughn. And they go to see a band. And anybody who knows me knows that there's always music. Well, usually there's music in any of my novels. So she goes to see a band and she's bitten by the lead singer. And then the lead singer takes off with her best friend Skylar. And that's the start of the afterlife of the party. So the vampires are not the love interest. The vampires are the bad dudes. And I had been reading a lot in the news and on Twitter about bands behaving badly in a variety of ways. And that kind of inspired me to create these supernatural predators who also were in a band.
We just have to, that's fantastic. We just have to ask quickly, Afterlife of the Party, I'm with the band spelled BANNED, and I'm a sucker for you. Are those your titles, or did you have help?
They are my titles. I love writing titles. And also, like, you might not pick up on this necessarily right away, but they're all they're riffs on song titles. So The Afterlife of the Party is a Fall Out Boy song. I'm with the Band is actually a country western song, but it's BAND. And A Sucker for You is a Jonas Brothers song. And that gives you a little hint about the bands in each of those novels. So I love, titles are always really hard. Usually I'm good at titles, but the second book in the trilogy, I'm with the band, I think I submitted like 200 titles before we came up with a new title. The original title was I'm with the Damned, DAMNED, and that didn't fly with my editor, so we tried to find something with kind of a similar feel that wouldn't be maybe offensive. So that's the story of the titles. And I don't know if anybody's had a chance to check out the covers, but the covers are fabulous. And they did all three covers kind of together. So I got to see all three covers at once, and I love them. So that's it.
Yes, absolutely fantastic. Between the title and the covers, it's already a winner, and we didn't even read the books yet. Well, hopefully some, but yeah. Okay, so thank you, Marlene. So now Chris Cannon is a speech therapist by day and the award-winning author of the Going Down in Flames series, the Boyfriend Chronicles, the Dating Dilemma series, and the Demon Bound series by night. She believes coffee is the elixir of life. Okay. Most evenings after work, you can find her sucking down caffeine and writing fire-breathing urban fantasies or sweet, snarky romantic comedies. You can find out more about Chris at chriscannonauthor.com. So Chris, welcome to our panel. And please tell us, your book is actually a prequel to the Going Down in Flames series. So what is this book about, and why did you choose to write a prequel? I'm going to cram 2 questions in there.
Okay. First, to kind of make it make more sense, I'm going to say the series is the Going Down in Flames series, and it's about this girl named Bryn. She turns 16 and flames shoot out of her mouth, and that's the first clue she has. She's a shape-shifting dragon, so surprise. And it turns out her parents ran away from a secret society of shape-shifting dragons to escape arranged marriages. And now she has to go back to that society. It's a very patriarchal society, and she has to attend a school there to learn how to control her magic. And they expect her to sit down and shut up and do as she's told. And she is not that kind of girl. So she has all sorts of adventures. So I wrote this series, and then people ask me, how did her parents get together? How did her parents run away? And so that is this book, Star-Crossed Dragons. And it's the story of her mom. Sarah Sinclair is a blue dragon, and blue dragons are the elite. They're like the 1%ers. They basically own everything. They live in mansions. They are all the lawyers. They make all the laws. They control the school and the curriculum. They decide who can marry who, what job you can have. They are very controlling. And her parents signed a contract for her to marry the guy that she really hates most in the world. But she's trying to suck it up and go along with the program. But then she meets Ian, who's a red dragon, who's a middle-class dragon. And he jokes around and he talks to her like she's a real person and just treats her in a way that this other guy has never treated her. So they end up, this is the story of how they come together, how they fall in love, and how they end up running away and then having Bryn in the series.
So you almost wrote fan fiction for your own series in writing a prequel.
That's one way to look at it, yes.
It's a slight spoiler, but I'm just going to risk it. I don't know how many other people were disappointed that she didn't shape into a dragon to bite Farron's head off. I was kind of waiting for that moment to occur.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe he's in the other series. We can't take him out so quickly.
Yeah, he has to be in the other series. But yeah, otherwise it would have been very tempting.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much. And Romina Garber is a New York Times and international best-selling author whose books include, I'm sorry for mispronouncing, La Luzona and the Zodiac series. Born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and raised in Miami, Florida, Romina landed her first writing gig as a teen. College, she wrote a weekly Sunday column for the Miami Herald that was later picked up for national syndication, and she hasn't stopped writing since. She was a graduate of Harvard College and a Virgo to the core. And you can visit her at rominagarber.com. So we're very excited to have you. And please tell us about, you have your first book is behind you, but you have another book that's coming out in August. So
that's right.
And that's part of the same series. So please tell us about your books.
Yes, hi. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So as you can see behind me and in close-up here, I'm the author of Lobisona and the upcoming Cazadora. So it's a duology, and Cazadora comes out August 17th. So this is a great time to pick up the books, especially because I'm running a pre-order campaign. So get it now. Let's see, what can I say? The Lobisona centers on Manu, who is a teen who's growing up in hiding in Miami with her mom because they're undocumented, but also because her eyes, as you can see, would draw too much attention. But when her mom is arrested by ICE and Manu's left alone in the world, she begins to follow clues to figure out who her mysterious father was and why they had to run away from his crime family, to the United States. And this search leads to the Everglades, of course, where she finds a buried secret species of paranormal creatures, of course, that's literally ripped from the pages of Argentine folklore, of childhood stories she's grown up with, where basically all the boys are born lobisones, or werewolves, and all the girls are born brujas, or witches. And as you can tell by the title, so it's not a spoiler, Manu does not exactly fit into this binary system of theirs, and she is about to upend their very rigid machismo society. And so this is actually the coolest part of Lobisona for me, is that it's based on a real world law. And so I call this my Dan Brown angle. Like, I always try to find like a real world little like passage, in every fantasy thing. And this is a real law that exists in Argentina. It's still in effect. You can Wikipedia it. That's La Ley de Padrinazgo Presidencial. That says that the president of Argentina basically becomes godparent to the seventh consecutive son or daughter in a family, and the state covers all their educational expenses, which I was so jealous of as a teen, and I didn't quite understand why the seventh got to be so lucky, and also like the rigidity in that whole, the fact that it has to be the same sex, and so of course I went down the rabbit hole of research to see why. And this led all the way back to this superstition about seventh sons and becoming werewolves. And I just find that so fascinating that it's still in effect today. And that like, I mean, I guess to a slightly less awesome edge to it, but that idea of like the words, the narratives, the labels, the way we describe a population or a people can very often concretize into actual laws, and sometimes, like in 2017 here in this country, actual cages for babies. Mm-hmm. And so it was very important for me to write this book from a very personal place and from a political place. And the reason that I wanted to use Argentine mythology for this was that law, which elucidates so beautifully this notion of how the words we repeat about people can become laws. And maybe this was an innocuous law and we're laughing at it, but when we start labeling humans illegal, and then it becomes okay to separate parents from children, and then it becomes okay to toss a baby into a cage, we really start to see the power of narratives and labels and words, and the real dangerous weapons that they can become. So I'll stop there.
Wow, there's so much going on. And then when you say that this is rooted largely in Argentine, I guess, mythology, or for werewolves and witches, did you stay true to that mainly for when you wrote it, or did you start, okay, I see the original, the 7 and the 7, and I'm just going to play around with it after that?
I totally played around with it. I wanted to tie it to more Argentine lore, and and find other ways. But also the biggest way I played around with it was the idea of a lobisona. Because even that word is charged, because you see lobison a lot, but you don't see lobisona a lot. If you Google the terms, you will find that it's a rare word. And even hearing it elicits like a peculiar reaction from people who speak Spanish. Like it draws like attention. And a big reason why I really wanted to make about a girl werewolf is because I feel like werewolfism got stolen from us. I believe that werewolves, it's the most feminine mythology you could come up with. Tied to the lunar cycle, once a month we change blood. Like, I mean, no, like this, there's nothing masculine about it. I don't understand quite how that got taken from us, but I really wanted to reclaim it. I want lobisona to be the natural, more commonplace word, and for lobison to be the rarer thing, you know? And this is my campaign to take werewolves back.
Has anyone had that reaction of good job, you're taking it back? Or are most people like, I don't know what you're talking about?
No, they like it. A lot of women really like it, especially because the first line of the book is about her period. You know, her period always comes on the full moon. And that's another thing. Like, where are these heroines? How are they handling their menstrual cycles while they're out there saving the world, you know? And how does it play into the paranormal creatures are drawn to blood. Blood is such a powerful, you know, so how does that play into the lore? I just think it's so fun. I mean, my editor did say, okay, let's pull back on all the blood period descriptions. So I guess I got a little too excited about that. It's the wrong kind of blood for this discussion.
And then one thing I noticed is that there's no mention of a werewolf biting someone to turn them into a werewolf. It's just werewolves. So is that also part of the Argentine folklore that it's not a biting thing, it's a born
that werewolves are born, not made. That notion, it comes from the superstition of the seventh child. And there's so many stories, and who knows how much of it is true or not, but there's lots of reports that actually this belief was so widespread that a lot of people were abandoning seventh children of the same. Like, there's some, you don't know how to separate the real from, you know, the not real, but yes, very much, you know. That was kind of the way it was believed. So that's kind of how I wanted to keep it. And also because, you know, I wanted to write about an immigrant species. That's something I didn't see growing up. I didn't feel, as much as I lived in books, I felt like the character that represented me was just around the next corner, but not quite there. And I think paranormal, and kind of leaning into the subject of this whole discussion, lends itself so uniquely well to the immigrant identity, because so many paranormal creatures are part human and part not, part of this world and part of another. And they have this split, you know, identity or heritage. And I kind of wanted to explore that through these creatures and this idea of, you know, their werewolfism or their magic. It hails from this other realm that's accessed on the full moon called lunaris. So every full moon, they return there to honor their roots because they must be in balance between the two. And I think that as an immigrant, I think so much about like keeping in balance between Argentina and the US and just kind of balancing the two sides of me, what language I pull out in a certain situation, just all of these different things, the code shifting, everything else that comes with it. And I wanted to explore that in a population. And it would have like kind of ruined that metaphor if, you know, the other way. Like I really wanted it to be like, okay, what happens when you live in the border, you know?
Yeah. Even though each time you went to the magical realm, I was like, forget the human world. Let's stay in the magical world. I don't care about the human world anymore. Okay. Well, very good. So we're actually, even though we got a good momentum going here, but we're going to cut to our first raffle that we're doing. And at this raffle, we're going to bring Tim on to ask questions about just general paranormal. Well, you'll see what the questions are. And to be part of the raffle, just type in your answers into the YouTube chat, and whoever gets the first answer correct will you'll send your information to Tim afterwards, and we'll mail you a copy of the book. So we've got one of each book that we're raffling off now. So where's Tim? Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Welcome.
Can you see my aura? Good. All right. Just to be clear, authors, you are disqualified from answering this. You're too knowledgeable, and we're a fair-minded organization. Ernesto, I don't know if you're able to post the answer choices on the screen for viewers to make it easier. I punched them into the private chat. I don't know if that goes to you or if it went to my dogs outside. I'm not sure where it went. But in any case, if you are able to do that, that might make it easier for people. But here's the question. And this is for the first book of 3 that we're going to be raffling right now. Which author created the planet Pern, P-E-R-N, and the genetically engineered dragons who helped the humans fight off the extra-planetary threat of the thread? Once again, I'll repeat the question, then I'll give you the answer choices. because I'm not sure if Ernesto's able to post those. So which author created the planet Pern and the genetically engineered dragons who helped the humans fight off the extraplanetary threat of the Thread? Anne McCaffrey, J.R.R. Tolkien, David Eddings, Ursula Le Guin. Once again, Anne McCaffrey, J.R.R. Tolkien, David Eddings, Ursula K. Le Guin. And I believe the answer, before I could even finish it, I think I saw it. There it is. The Wook wife, right?
Kelly Powers.
That's Kelly. Kelly, great job. You get it. And nice job on ESP before I even finish the question. That's really excellent. Fitting in with the paranormal vibe here today. All right, here's the second question. And obviously we're trying to hit the thematic areas of each of these books. So that was obviously the dragonish area. Now we're going to do, well, I'll leave it to you to guess. It's really hard to figure out. What types of branches laid across a vampire's grave prevent it from rising at night? What types of branches, or what type of branches laid across a vampire's grave prevent it from rising at night?
Google quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, you have one answer just came in.
We don't seem to have a lot of vampire fighters. We've got people are befriending. We've got, oh, I'm sorry. I should probably give you choices anyway. Oak, hawthorn, ash, or aspen. I'm so sorry. I should have helped because that's kind of tough. Oak, hawthorn, ash, aspen. So we have one guess for ash. Any others before we close the window of entries and announce who got it? All right, we've got two guesses in.
Here comes two.
Just going to apologize for the dead airspace, but it's just, you've got to give these people a little bit of chance to correct their typos, see what autocorrect does to their answers. They typed in Hawthorne and it came out Hemingway or something. Who knows? Who knows what autocorrect did? Let's see. We have two guesses in so far, and I'll just be a bit of a hinter and say we're still open here. We need more. Yeah, actually, it would be great if somebody else won something. So thank you for asking that, Kelly. We probably should allow somebody else.
We don't have a lot of vampire fighters.
We do not. We do not.
That's a hard one.
It is. But our neighborhood's infested with them, so we all know that here in Long Beach. But all right.
All three, except
I know.
for the answer.
I love it. So clearly,
There's Bev.
there we go, Bev. You got it. There you go. So Bev, it turns out it's aspen, and interestingly, it was also used for stakes. As it was believed that Christ's cross was made from aspen. So that's kind of a little interesting background there. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the third question for the third book that we're going to be raffling off. This is in honor of Chris and her series. An unpublished novel about werewolves was very recently discovered among this famous American author and Nobel Prize recipient's estate. And I don't have choices for you.
This is for Romina, actually.
It's Romina.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. No. Right. We already did the Dragon series.
Oh, I know this answer too.
This is recent, a big recent story that just came out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see. So, I'll repeat the question once again while we're killing. So an unpublished novel about werewolves was very recently discovered among this famous American author and Nobel Prize recipient's estate. And this is for Romina's series. I'm so sorry, Romina.
Can I give a hint? I think I know the answer. I'll give a hint. Isn't it a California author?
Correctamundo.
Yes.
California author.
Yes.
early 1900s ish.
Yeah, yep, okay. That's a good hint, though. The California author.
Yeah. No, that is good.
You probably had to read one of the books in school that he wrote.
We might need to give a yes.
We're
That's another
practically
one.
spelling it out now.
Yeah. I was going to really spell it out with a big hint.
Well, they may need the big hint.
Yeah, I think so.
Just
And,
three
he
names.
did, yes, and he did a lot for farmers. Hint, hint. He might have studied this in school and studied
It's
the
my
plight of
snack right now.
not Mark Twain, but
From California.
from California. Yes. All right. Well,
Wait,
it looks
I'm not keeping up with the curriculums.
there you go. There you go. There we go. Jody gets it.
Yeah.
There
we go.
Steinbeck. Okay, great. So that is the first round of raffles. We will be raffling 3 more books off in a bit. But for now, we want to get back to the interesting people here on the screen. So take it away, Esther, and thank you so much for participating, viewers out there.
Thank you, Tim. All right. So we're back, and let's get into our panel section of the panel. We'll start with just a general question because I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page, pun intended, I guess. Just the general question of what is paranormal as far as to each of the authors, like how would you define paranormal and what do you think is included in that genre? And we'll start with Chris because you have a book about dragons, which I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think is paranormal. So why don't you begin?
Oh, I think paranormal is anything, any kind of magical, mythical creature, anything basically not human that you have heard stories about. And I like it when the paranormal exists in the real world, just kind of the juxtaposition of it. So I think any magic, any, it can even be folklore, any myths, any even like tall tale kind of things that you can bring to life in an interesting way. I think that can all fall under paranormal.
So do you think that would include fantasy or sits alongside fantasy, or is fantasy something totally different? Because you could have a lot of creatures in fantasy as well.
Yeah, I think fantasy, if it's in it, typically when I think fantasy, I think it's in its own fantasy world, where when I think paranormal, I think that they inhabit our world and live among us kind of thing.
Ah, very good. All right. Marlene, how would you define paranormal?
You know, people always ask me this question. And so I think a good way to explain it is just like, you know, out of the ordinary, supernatural, things that go bump in the night, which kind of is a really wide classification. And I love paranormal, and my Dead series is paranormal, and my Afterlife series is paranormal. But I think a lot of times paranormal takes traditional mythology, like Romina did, like Chris does, like I do. You take it and then you kind of twist it, put the modern spin on it, or place it in a modern world. So, you know, like vampires have existed in fiction since, you know, Bram Stoker and even before. But to write paranormal fiction, you have to kind of put your own spin on the vampire world and put it in a relatable way. So I think that's the difference between paranormal and, you know, we used to call urban fantasy, remember that that phrase, and people usually call it contemporary fantasy now. I think they kind of bump up next to each other a lot of times. I think there's fantasy, to me, tends to be more like I think magic based maybe, but not always. So I think there's a lot of room to stretch those terms.
Right. And only because you mentioned things that go bump in the night, where would you put, is horror alongside your view of paranormal, or it's the umbrella? What's the umbrella?
I've been told that if you have vampires, it's horror. Like straight out. And so that's the thing is, like, I think since Twilight, vampires have been, I hate to say they have less teeth, but vampires are not as monstrous. And that's one thing that changed too, is the idea of the paranormal creature as the misunderstood outsider, which I love, but I also like the terrible predator, horrible creatures. And I think that's the horror side. So it could go either way. I think there's a lot of terminology that's kind of, there could be both in one book. There can be horror, there can be romance, and there can be, paranormal in one novel.
Yeah, that makes sense, that there's kind of a blurred lines between the genres.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Romina, I think you sort of began describing it and talking about your world, but how would you describe paranormal?
I would agree with everything said. I do agree that they all bump up against each other, so it's hard to draw those lines. I do think it has to do with, if not our world, then some kind of thing that passes for our world. And, because I do think when you go, let's say our world, but a different time period, I wouldn't necessarily classify it as paranormal maybe, so because I think the whole idea is that the paranormal element should be something more specific, unless I guess it's the traveling thing, but it should be something, because, I also, what comes to mind aside from creatures is telekinesis and powers like that, and poltergeist, and I don't know, all these different concepts, so I feel like it's an umbrella term for things that, like you were saying, out of the ordinary, of the norm of our day-to-day experiences, so obviously meeting a vampire would fall under that, but it is kind of strange, it gets it, I guess stuff that can't be scientifically explained, or I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So going into constructing paranormal worlds, one thing that we often see is that within paranormal worlds, there's often some sort of hierarchical structure, because the paranormal peoples live in their own kind of community. So when you're writing, and actually each of you, Romina, you've explained a lot about, the women are witches and the boys are werewolves, and that's the way it is. And for Chris, you have the blue dragons and the red dragons, and there's also green and black dragons. They do not interact with each other. You have the upper class and the lower class, and that's the way it's rigid. Marlene, I don't know. We sort of know that there's a society, because I think one of the band members, his dad is kind of ruling. We don't see it as much yet in the first book. I don't know what's to come.
It's more of a hidden world. They exist, but they're not it's not out in the open. I just started rewatching True Blood the other day, and at the beginning, it was at the very beginning of True Blood, it was the vampires had just come out into the open. But in my book, they're operating kind of undercover, but my main character, her grandmother is a witch, and so she is familiar with the unexplained, let's say. And a lot of people, your rational brain automatically makes excuses for something that you can't understand from science, like Romina said. And in my book, Tansy's kind of aware that this world exists, but she hasn't ever actually come face to face with a vampire. And so it's no secret that she's bitten right away, but because she's a Mariotti witch, a vampire bite doesn't react the same way with her as it would with just a normal human. And so that's kind of what I explore in the first book is what happens to Tansy after she's bitten by a vampire, and the rules of the vampire world. And that's one thing that I really had to think about, is there are so many vampire stories out there. You really have to think about how you're going to make your vampire story different, or what can you say? And so that's why I really wanted to go back to vampires as predators instead of vampires as the love interest, because if you look at historically, Bram Stoker's Dracula was not, the hot guy that you fall in love with. And there are plenty of hot guys that you fall in love with in my trilogy, but it just so happens that they're not the vampires. And I think that was a real switch, because Twilight kind of brought in that really sympathetic vampire, vegetarian vampire. My vampires are not vegetarians and they're not sympathetic. And so that was a big change. And so I had to think about that. I had to think about their world and, who knew, but, let's face it, there's a lot of unsolved murders in real life. And so these predators can operate undercover, right? Like, that's not so far out of the realm of possibility. So you kind of have to look at the real world and the world you're creating as a paranormal world, and see how they can converge and what happens when they do come together. And that's kind of the story of the afterlife of the party. Is Tansy's really, a lot of it's about friendship, because she is determined that she's not going to let these vampires take her best friend. And then all this stuff happens on the road. So it's kind of a road trip book, and it's, I like to kind of do mashups. So it's a little bit of, there's some romance in it. There's some, scary parts. And in the second book, I always like to bring in more supernatural creatures. And so the second book, I'm with the band, has a few new creatures in there. So I don't know if it's not like there's a ruling class or anything, because it takes place within the traditional world. But in the vampire world, they have vampire kings and queens. So, but we don't recognize the vampire kings and queens, but in the vampire world, there's a definite hierarchy.
Right. And actually in Chris's book, that's something that we see it very strongly, the hierarchy that exists. So when you're writing, especially because you sort of already have the world that existed, but how did that affect writing the story, Chris, that you're kind of telling this prequel, and it's almost like the hierarchy defined everything in the story?
Yeah, the second book, or the prequel, I didn't know how hard it was going to be to write a prequel, because I had to go back through the 5 books in the series and make notes about all the laws I mentioned and how everything was. And one of the funniest things was I created characters in this story that I really loved, like Ian's mom and dad. And then I realized, well, crap, I killed them off in the other books. And I felt bad about that. I was like, oh. So, yeah, the prequel aspect was interesting, but I really wanted to write something just about how there are certain people with, like we say, 1%ers. There are people that control everything, even if you don't realize they're controlling stuff. When you really look into stuff, you kind of see the people with the money and the power kind of make a lot of the decisions. And part of the Going Down in Flames book was when the daughter comes along, she works to change a lot of that. And so it was kind of like, knowing that in this book, the parents were going to have to deal with all those things, and that they couldn't be together because of the way the hierarchy existed, that they would have to run away to be able to be together. But it is a lot of fun to write the Blues with their mansions and their, very proper attitude, and that, they do everything about, how dare you say that to me, or, oh, he's being rude. And people are walking around going, yeah, that dude's an asshat, so the variety of the dialogue, the real upper crust kind of, almost elite sounding dialogue. And then you get the regular people, that there's the middle class dragons are red. There are black dragons that are like the artists. They're the singers and the painters and the creative ones. And then there are the green dragons that they are actually, well, I should probably mention the dragons all have different breath weapons. So the red dragons breathe fire, the blue dragons breathe ice, the black dragons breathe lightning, and the green dragons breathe sonic waves. And because of that, they can find like gemstones under the ground. So like they're the miners, but they also make the plants grow. They can funnel their power into the plants and make them grow to like make crops grow, or to have roses in winter in the garden. And then I left out one. Oh, the green dragon's breath weapon is wind. So they could do like tornadoes and stuff. And they are the scientists. They're the smartest dragons. So all the dragons have their different parts to play. So everyone has kind of believed that the blue dragons were right in telling them what you could and could not do, because the green dragon has to be the scientist because he's the smartest. And the red dragons are the most muscular. And so, of course, they're the middle class and in the army. And the black dragons have spiky hair and tattoos, and they're very artsy crafty. So, of course, they're, you know, making all the art and creating everything. So it really plays into that very segregated system of what you're allowed to do and not, that forced Sarah and Ian to run away so they could be together. And then it was just so much fun in the series about the daughter that she comes in and upsets all of that stuff.
And did you have a thought for Sarah and Ian to try to fight the system and then fail at it instead of only running away? Or in this situation, flight was better than fight?
Yeah, because he could have been her dad. Sarah's dad was, he, you know, is a blue. He could have had Ian just executed just on his word, or he could have him thrown in jail forever. They are just the absolute authority on everything. So if they were, they couldn't just say, hey, you know, let's see if my parents will be okay with this, because if they were discovered, he would have been executed and possibly too. So. Yeah, so that was the only way for that one.
Oh, yeah. I actually, I thought it was pretty funny when the green dragons take bets on what the blue dragons are going to say next. But that they have like a tally going that every time they're too proper in a way that doesn't. Of course he said that next, because they're so predictable almost in their mannerisms, because they're just so rigid. And that's kind of a funny thing that you added in there. So, Romina, you sort of started speaking about this in the creation of your world, the way that the system of, you know, the boys and the girls and things like that. But you specifically chose kind of what like the Going Down in Flames series, that we're going to tear down the system. So what is this, you know, how does the system kind of bind them in where they are? And why is this, like, why are we going with the tear down the system option for this?
So in this system, you know, every Septimus is born in, it sort of is stuck in the body they're born into. And that also means that they're stuck sort of in the role that they're born into. And so, you know, if they use interchangeably the terms, you know, girl and bruja, for instance, you know, so that means that every girl is a bruja and every bruja is a girl. But, you know, there's septimas who maybe wouldn't call themselves brujas or don't like identify as, and so what happens there? And so I wanted to get into kind of the nuances again of language and language's limitations and the way that it like cages us. So that was a big part of it. And just kind of that idea of being born into this role, you know, like there's an understanding that the lobisones hunt, you know, and the brujas brew, you know, like there's that kind of that, and it's like so limiting. And so first Lobisona, you know, it's such an intimate narrative account of this girl sort of discovering that there is no end to what she is. She's basically a flower that's never done blossoming, you know, and she's going to continue to blossom. And we have no idea ultimately what she could be because she's undocumented. And what undocumented means is it's never been documented before. And it's such a beautiful word, and I want to reclaim it. And then in Cazadora, what happens is they tap into a larger resistance. So they tap into an intergenerational fight that's been going on way before them and will continue after them. And, you know, they're not the heroes, quote unquote. They're just part of a bigger revolutionary machine, which I think sometimes we lose that, and sometimes in YA, because it could be a little reductive of like, well, this is the hero and this is the thing and this is the person who saved the world. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how every new, you know, revolutionary, for every Malala and Greta and these great, amazing, young, brilliant women, you know, they feed into a long narrative of revolutionaries and activists, and it's a lineage, you know, and it's an honor and it's part of something, but it also is what slows it down and maybe creates these obstacles, because it can't just be one person, that'd be a dictator, that'd be the opposite, you know, so you do have to move with a big group and different generations and, you know, those who have fought before and have a different, and so I wanted to look a little bit into that generational dialogue for change, because it's just such a big part of what's going on in our own world. And of course, you know, even when you do meet your heroes or those revolutionary groups or the places where you think you might fit, even then it's never perfect, you know, because when you have a group of people who are solely bound by the idea that they should have freedom of lifestyle choice, what happens when you start to get some choice and you start to realize that you don't align in a lot of other ways? You know what I mean? Like you wanted the freedom, but with freedom comes chaos. That's the whole point, you know? And so that's the point of why it's so hard to move sometimes in these progressive liberal movements, where it's like, that's the whole, you know, in my first series, Zodiac, I had this line, when we open our minds too wide, we risk closing them. And, you know, sometimes like you can become so open-minded that you become closed-minded, you know, and you just went full circle, you know? And so I wanted to explore those kind of dynamics.
Well, and then just to clarify, when you speak about that, why are the witches always like this or the werewolves always like this? There's nothing, I don't know if there's an answer for, it doesn't seem there's anything they could do about the fact that they're born with certain powers. Or is it kind of that the witch, just because she's a witch, doesn't mean she can't also be a protector or someone on the front lines, versus the werewolves have to protect the witches. So it's not a matter that you're going to change the magic system. You're just going to allow them to explore more options within the magic that they're born with.
Exactly. And also, how do we know that there weren't other lobisonas? How do we know that there are brujos for that sake? Like, when we don't allow people into existence, then they're just going to be in hiding. I mean, everything, you know, everything on down like goes like that. Like, you can't really like outlaw anything that exists. Like, all you can do is try to suppress it, I guess, you know? But in this case, it's like, we don't know who else is out there. And clearly, if they are out there, they're not going to be coming forward to see the kind of treatment they would get. So that's kind of the question, you know, which came first, you know? And if there was to be more acceptance, would we discover that there's like a whole wide spectrum of powers, genders, everything, you know, in this world or not? And I think that's what they're struggling with, because they're a much smaller civilization, a much younger civilization, and smaller population, way, way smaller than humans. And they originated as an abused species at the hands of humans. So they also have they're very protective of each other, you know, and they're terrified, you know, and terror of the unknown or the other, as we all know, is what so often leads to these kinds of problems. So there's just so much to explore, I feel like, sociologically there.
I'm just going to kind of rip off of the terror of the unknown, because this also kind of feeds into the structures that these universes have. And this is your own opinion, whether or not this is what you wrote in your book or not. Do you think it's a good idea for paranormal and humans to live together? Because personally, even if I'm going to love vampire books, I don't think I would sleep at night if I knew there was a vampire living next to me. Not just because his music would be playing loud at night, but I don't want that. So we see, like in Chris's book, the whole governance is we live in the modern world, but we stay in our closed part of the modern world. We don't cross the boundaries. So human world, paranormal world is kept apart. Any of the dragons who might live there are going to live as humans. They're not going to reveal themselves as dragons in the human world. And then Marlene's book is called Everything's Meshed Together, because the vampires are like out there picking up groupies and whatever else they're doing, you know, out on the with their and so we see that that's not exactly the best, you know, option, even though maybe it would be a good option if we could have better vampires. And then for Romina's book, we have the werewolves. It seems like there is a group that do want the paranormal and I don't want to call it normal, but our world to coexist. But again, I don't know that I'd be comfortable with a werewolf living next door. And if I was in high school, I can't compete against a werewolf. So, you know, is it a really good idea? What's the best option? And I guess we'll just start with Romina, because we kind of piggybacked off of your answer there.
Yeah.
What do you think is actually? Yeah.
I agree with you entirely. Like in the True Blood, we were just talking about True Blood, like in that realm. Yeah. Like I would be terrified, you know, and I would be like, no law's going to control these guys. Like I'd be one of the first ones dead, you know, but in the Lobisona universe, that's why I made that twist where they're 0.00001% or something like that of the human population. So they are in danger, because you can have all the power you want, but ultimately it's the same thing as we say with generals and soldiers on the ground. You can have as many, you know, you can have these great generals, but as long as there's more soldiers on the ground, like good luck controlling, you know? And so I do think that's an interesting question, like who would, you know, win out? And one of the things that even among the septimists that they are afraid of is they're like, well, what do you think would happen if humans found out that there's real magic? Like that there's like women who they can use to like brew potions and, you know, make magic spells for them. and hey, maybe even breed them, you know, who knows all the ideas humans could come up with for, you know, to take. So like, let's be honest, you know, it's not pretty. Our history is not pretty. We talk about these paranormal creatures as horrible creatures. Where do you think the inspiration comes from? You know, like, it's that there's no such, like, the evil isn't outside, it's within. That's why we can't eradicate it. To eradicate one is to eradicate, you know, it all. So so I do think that's interesting, and I don't know how it would fare for my world. Honestly, for my species, it might not go as well.
Yeah, I don't know that people would react well to knowing this. You'd have probably three groups: people who would react well, people who wouldn't care, and people who wouldn't react well, if that was a true thing. Marlene, I know you did focus on vampires as predators, but let's say they weren't all exactly necessarily predators. You know, is there really a vampire who could subsist not on blood? Isn't that what makes them a vampire? Is it ever safe to live with vampires?
Well, the thing is that you want your, you want something bad to happen in your story, right? Because if everything's lovely and wonderful, nobody wants to read it, right? Like, so there has to be some sort of drama and some sort of big bad, right? But you have paranormal creatures all have weaknesses, because if they didn't have weaknesses, it would be completely terrifying and also boring, because your main character could never triumph over the, you know, big bad. And if they didn't have a way to, you know, get rid of evil, that's, you know, then what happens? You have a main character who cannot fight, right? If you make your antagonist completely unstoppable, no weaknesses, then how is the main character going to triumph? So that traditionally, and in mythology, vampires have weaknesses. You know, the stake will do a good job. In Afterlife of the Party, it's no secret that Tansy, the main character, uses a drumstick from a drummer, you know, a drumstick as her stake to stake vamps. And werewolves, they have, you know, usually they're allergic to silver. There's a huge mythology of these paranormal creatures having a weakness, because otherwise human beings would be scared out of their ever-loving minds. And no, I don't necessarily think, I would love to believe that we could all live together in harmony and peace, but I don't think the chances are good of a werewolf living next door and not somebody not going to Lowe's and sharpening a few steaks. I think that's just human nature. They're you know, they are scared of what they don't understand. And so that the paranormal creatures are something that they don't understand. They're scared of them. They have power. Power in society is always, you know, something that people either want, or they want to take away from the people who have it, or they want to make sure that the people who don't have any power stay that way. And that's why predators are predators, and why vampires are vampires, is because they want to take something from someone, whether they want to or not. So I don't think that we would have a sweet, loving society with vampires and werewolves next door.
And then, Chris, the society that you created, or the world you created, that vampires stay very much apart from humans, is that the ideal society, or do you think maybe they might be able to reveal themselves, or what do you think about that?
With the dragons, I know in the later books, Bryn keeps wondering why she can't just run away to the human world. And they're like, no, they will hunt you down and bring you back. Because if a scientist should capture you and study your DNA and find out we exist, then it would be, you know, horrible, because they would come after them. Because, you know, some people might want to understand and think it was cool, but most people would probably just want to dissect them and see, you know, what made them tick. And dragons are raised on gory stories of don't go somewhere and do anything, because, you know, someone will come and take you away and put you in a lab and dissect you. So, yeah, they're taught to very much stay to themselves so they don't expose their world to other people.
Yeah, but I'm thinking now, I don't know if there's any indication of a weakness for taking down a dragon in any of your books. is or at least not on the one I read. Or besides for like the blues have their pride that could bring them down, or you know examples like that. Is there something to indicate what could take down a dragon?
Well, I mean, in human form, they could be killed, you know, in any way that you would kill a human. In dragon form, they don't have very many vulnerabilities, but there are knights with lances that are taught how to fight against dragons because, you know, there's a town next to the school whose name escapes me right now. Dragon's Bluff. Duh. I've written 5 books and I'm forgetting the name of the town. Okay. So Dragon's Bluff is next to the school and it is populated with descendants of knights who used to fight side by side with the dragons. And so they have been trained. They have swords. They're trained with swords and they're trained with lances so that if they would have to go in battle again, they could. So they are taught ways to fight other dragons and how to kill them with the swords and the lances. But dragons against each other, if they're in battle, it gets pretty bloody, attacking each other, going in talons first and ripping each other apart or biting on wings and ripping them off and all sorts of not nice stuff. But in human form, they're just as vulnerable as any other human.
So I think we agree that the paranormal should just stay in books then. It seems like we've all sort of agreed. As much as we'll love the stories, it's like, just stay there. Oh, that will actually be our segue now to our next raffle. And then after that, we'll wrap up with a few more questions before we just wrap up the panel altogether. So can we have Tim back on, please, for our last 3 questions?
Poof.
Hey, Tim.
Thank you. I've been loving this panel. It's a really fun idea to think about these creatures living next door. And of course, it would always go bad. Totally wrong. Someone's going to try to do a petting zoo with dragons. You know, what's wrong with this picture? You know, the werewolf living next door. Where's Fluffy? Where did Fluffy go?
No.
I haven't seen Fluffy for weeks. So it's bad.
We didn't ask you, Tim. We know you would endorse the paranormal world. Like, no.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, here we go. This is question number 1. And Ernesto's going to post the answer choices for question number 1. So here we go. Hopefully, Ernesto, you're ready to post. What is one of the major differences in the early depictions of dragons between Eastern and Western cultures? So in the early depictions of dragons, what is one of the major differences between Eastern and Western cultures? A, wings. B, fire breathing. C, impenetrable scales. D, long tails.
Ooh.
And I'm very proud of myself for saying impenetrable scales correctly the first time.
What about tails with the ALES?
Oh, gosh. Long tails.
Where's the editor?
Yeah, good point. That's a bonus question there. What is
they have long, like, stories. Okay.
Yeah, really. They're very loquacious dragons. A, what is A? I don't have A in front of me.
The wings.
Wings was A.
Okay, thank you. That is correct. Good job, Samantha. Put your name down so I remember. And Samantha, make sure you email me your, privately. You know my email address, my official RA address, your snail mail address, so that we can have these sent to you. All the others, I already have contact with you, so not a problem. Number 2 question. Ernesto is ready with the answers. This famous author, best known for writing about vampires, is published under several names, but none are the name given at birth. Which famous vampire writing author was originally born Howard Allen Francis O'Brien? Answer A, Bram Stoker. B, Anne Rice. C, Stephen King. D, George R.R. Martin. Oh,
Oh, we got Samantha again.
yes. Sam, we're going to try to give it to somebody else if you don't mind. Sorry, even though you're super knowledgeable. We'll give it to one more person trying to qualify. Maybe if someone's in the room with you, Samantha. Your husband. Very sneaky way to get another book. Just really saw that.
Now, so just be brave to answer a question, everyone.
Yeah. All right. My gosh. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll give question 3 some airspace, and then I'll ask one more question for this. No, actually, let's do this one. Okay, so we're going to replace that because obviously, we saw the answer. So, which author died in poverty in 1946, but is today considered one of the most significant authors of 20th century supernatural horror fiction? And these answer choices are out. Sorry, this is not question 3. Sorry, hold off, Ernesto. This is a new one to replace question 2. Sorry. Shooting from the hip here. Which author died in poverty in 1946, but is today considered one of the most significant authors of 20th century supernatural horror fiction? And we're not going to give you answer choices. You just got to come up with it. But this is a biggie. This is a biggie for supernatural. Biggie. Yes. Very good. Roxanne Young. Nice.
Roxy!
Okay. And the final question, ladies and gentlemen. Where is it? Here we go. In Ovid's Metamorphosis, this is question 3, Ernesto. What king of Arcadia was transformed into a wolf by Zeus? And those are the answer choices. In Ovid's Metamorphosis, what king of Arcadia was transformed into a wolf by Zeus?
We need our tick, 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 tick.
Either everyone's Googling or no one wants to take a guess.
Everyone's desperately trying to spell correctly. These are like unusual. Yeah, interesting. They're all kind of seem like they're related to lycanthrope, so there's no hint there.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, we've got. All right. Well, whoever is the Google Meister is that comes up with this, we'll just go on and as it comes up in the comments, I'll just Esther, you can just announce. Are you able to see the comments too, Esther, or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So, and I think you know the answer, I think, to this, right? Or is this the one I came up with? The question I came up with, I can't remember. Oh wow, there's nobody's coming up with it. We really got everybody. Okay, well we can go on, and if somebody comes up with it, we'll announce it. So.
Oh, Chris got a shout out.
Hi, Samantha.
All right. Oh, we lost Marlene. Oh well. Okay. Bring Marlene back. So, I guess if someone does have the answer, you could just post one of the letters in. Yeah,
in the comments, and then yeah.
Okay, we'll just keep going. We got 2 or 3 questions left, then we're going to round this out. So back to our authors. There's something about the paranormal that, even though it's considered beyond normal or beyond above normal, outside the normal, there is still something about it that allows us to sort of explore our own humanity. To maybe it's the contrast of what isn't normal to then see what is quote unquote normal. So how do you see that either within your stories or just as a general idea of paranormal? How do you see that coming into play? That aspect that we can learn a little bit more about being human through writing paranormal. So let's start with Chris. How would you answer that question?
I think part of writing YA is everybody in high school feels like they are different, they don't fit in, there's something wrong with them. And I think when you write YA with paranormal creatures like dragons, then they really are different and they don't fit in with everybody else. And I think people can relate to it because of that fact. And I think you can look at, through the character's eyes, you can view like what other people would be like we're thinking the scientists would come and dissect people. So you can kind of just look at how humans treat creatures and how humans treat other humans.
I guess also the fear factor, like what they might be afraid of. Like you said, the scientists coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my computer's about to die, so I'm going to run and grab the power cord real quick.
No. Okay. Well, I'm glad we got your answer in there first then. Romina, how would you answer that one? How does this, I guess, outsideness help us discover our own inness or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's the outsider's task sort of to observe almost, it's like they're the best position for that. And so I do think it's an interesting perspective from which to view our humanity and our sociology and all of that. So I do think that's, and exactly, like they can't help but be outsiders, but be different or hybrids or whatever it is. So, it is a really great metaphor, especially when writing, I think, YA and children's stuff and everything where they're still formulating and understanding these concepts. But even as adults too, because we tend to have such charged notions of identity, and this is such a great reminder,
Yes. Marlene, how would you address that?
I think it's one of the questions I always kind of think about when I'm writing, even in the afterlife of the party where the monsters are maybe more obvious, is who are really the monsters in the world. Because there are monsters all around us and we don't necessarily recognize them. And that's one of the things that you learn as not to be really depressing, but when you are a teen, that is definitely something that you have to learn, is to recognize that not everyone has the best intentions. And maybe the monster's not the bad guy. Maybe the monster's the good guy. And maybe the person that's classified as, whatever little classification box you want to put them in, maybe that person is really a really good person. And the person that you think is terrible is actually not terrible and is wonderful. So I think that, who are the real monsters in our world is always something that I think about. Like, especially like in the afterlife of the party, we tend to really look up to talented people who can sing, people who can, write a song. That is really attractive, right? Like that talent is so attractive to us, but they are not necessarily, they're not necessarily good people and they're not necessarily bad people, but just by virtue of their talent, that doesn't make them a good person. Or just because they, can't go outside during the day doesn't mean they're a bad person. So that's what I like to think about, is like what truly makes a monster. And it's not always the people who are the outsiders. Sometimes it's the people in charge.
So it's also almost not always the outside that makes someone an outsider. It can be what's inside.
Yeah.
Even though we know that writers, particularly ones on the screen right now, even though they have great writing talent, they're also great people. So we'll just throw that in there. I wanted to throw in like a fun question to ask. Is there any one character in your story that you had to do something to them for the sake of the story that you really wish you didn't have to do to them? So anything that you're like, oh, I really like this character too much to make them go through this, but it's necessary. Well, so starting with Marlene, do you have a character like that? It could be this series or a different series.
I think you always have to have a character like that, because if it's a writer's natural reaction to want to protect our characters, because first of all, if you write, I usually write series. So my Dead Is series, it's an 8-book series, and the main character's name is Daisy. And I love Daisy. I love her. I still love her and I still miss her. But you can't protect those characters. And same thing with Tansy in the afterlife of the party. I would hope that you really feel something for those characters because you're going to spend a lot of time with them, but you cannot protect them. In fact, the more you try to protect them, you better not protect them. You better like the worse you can make it, the more you can throw at them, because otherwise you're, there's no story. Again, you have to put your characters in the middle of chaos, right? In the middle of something happening.
Right. Well, there was almost a point that I was going to interrupt and just save Tansy's friend, because she was just, it was like, enough already. You need to be saved. Come here. Romina, do you have an answer to that one? Is there any character that you're like, sorry, but this has to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's actually at an SCBWI conference that an author, when I pre-published, I just remember an author, I was there pre-published, and an author saying that, like, when, like, who the author, like, what author's favorite character was by who had it worst in the story, and that, like, the more you love a character, the worse you have to make it for them. And I've always, like, I've really taken that to heart. And obviously in this book, it would be taking her mom away, having Ice take her mom. I mean, strangely enough, the biggest, most cold, awful villains of my series aren't the paranormal creatures at all, but rather the Ice agents.
Right. Chris, what about you? Is there a character that you're like, sorry?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned in Star-Crossed Dragons, I wrote the parents that I love. I knew that they were going to be killed off. But in the Going Down in Flames series, there's a main character. There's a character that the people grow to love, and I don't want to give away who it is that dies. But when my mom read that this person died in battle, she called and yelled at me. She said, she was like, "How dare you kill off that person?" I'm like, well, she had to die to make the story go forward. And I'm like, sorry. So yeah, so that was funny to me. But
I actually, in the Star-Crossed Dragon book, is her Amelia, or what's?
His girlfriend.
His girlfriend, the person he's supposed to be married. I was kind of, because she's also great. She seems like a nice, warm person. I'm like, oh, sorry, I don't think it's. You might have some rough road ahead. That's about to happen.
Yeah, because he's running away, and she'll never, that was who she was supposed to marry, so she'll have to be assigned to someone else, and that would be traumatic. And yeah, so
the story's got a story. And let's just ask just one more question about the writing. I get sort of like a writing process sort of question. What is one of your favorite parts of the writing process, and one part of the writing process that you absolutely dread? Or maybe not absolutely, but you kind of dread a little bit. So, okay, well, back to Chris. What's one of your favorite parts and one of your not as favorite parts?
My favorite part is dialogue. When I write a story, it's basically the characters having conversations in my head. I see it like a movie, but I'm only writing down the dialogue, and then I'll get 30,000 words in, and I'm like, I don't have anything but dialogue. There's no descriptions of anything. The characters aren't doing anything. No one knows where they are. Are they sitting? Are they standing? What room are they in? So having to go back and put that in is my least favorite part, because that part does not come naturally to me. It's just the dialogue just flows. And then I'm like, oh, crap. What are they wearing? Where are they going? What are they doing? So that's the part that is not so much fun for me.
You haven't yet figured out how to do an only dialogue book that's sort of, I like that shirt you're wearing, and that way we'll have all the information. That hasn't happened yet, I guess.
No.
Romina, what's your best favorite part of writing, and like not as very much favorite part of writing?
The part I like absolutely detest is the pre-writing, though, like trying to conceive is what I call it. And like, it's so ugly and painful and horrible. And every time I'm like, why? And that's kind of where I am right now. And like, I'll fill in like 3 whole journals worth of things, and it's all crap, and then it's like you get midway through the 4th journal and maybe there's a seed of something. I hate this part, as you can tell. And my favorite part, I would say, is once I'm well into the first draft and I'm getting into like past the midpoint. Once I pass that midpoint, it's like a downhill ski, just like, oh, it's so great. It just goes on autopilot, and like things I didn't think about before start to click, and new things start to happen, and I'm just racing and trying to grab everything as I go, and when I get to the bottom, it's exhilarating. And then of course like you said, there's a bunch of stuff missing still, but just that ride of seeing how it's going to play out after you've plotted it in your head, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Marlene, what about you?
I love it all and I hate it all. So I have to say that it depends on, it's not the same for every book, which I think people might not realize. Well, for me anyway, it's never the same. Even books in a series or in a trilogy, each book's different. And I feel like every time I start a new book, it's like, hey, have I ever done this before? What am I doing? And so I usually know the beginning and I know the end. And so sometimes the middle is kind of, it's like trying to figure out how to get to the end. It's the middle that I'm kind of like, it's a little murky, right? Like I'm trying to figure out the middle. And it's not really that I hate it. It just like, it usually takes me a little longer to figure out what is going to happen in the middle, because I see the beginning. Usually the first sentence will come, just kind of spring to mind. And I always kind of see the end, but it's like the middle that I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get to the end. And so that's like the hardest part, I think, for me. And I also just want to say that if anybody's having trouble writing in a particular way that they normally do, like let's say you're a big outliner and outlining's not working, and or you're a pantser and that's not working, I truly believe that sometimes you can just kind of switch it up and that will kind of spark something new. So I'm writing something new right now, and this author, Mary Atkins, who's an adult author, she writes by hand in 4 notebooks. And so I am trying the completely writing a whole novel in 4 notebooks. Usually I do a combo of writing and then typing on the computer. So I'm really paranoid because I'm worried I'm going to spill coffee all over this handwritten notebook and cry. But anyway, that's my little tip is if you're, stuck, try a different way.
Oh, very good. Well, not because we want to end, but I think eventually we'll have to wrap up the panel. Let's just, if anyone wants to, we'll go through each of the authors. If you have kind of like a one-liner that you want to close out with, and also let us know what's next for you so we can know what to look forward to. So back to Marlene, you have any one-liner and what can we look forward to from you?
I don't know what a one-liner would be, sorry, that I would say, but The Afterlife of the Party is out now. It came out in February. And the second book in the trilogy, I'm with the Band, comes out in October. And like Romina, I'm on a pre-order campaign. So please feel free to pre-order our books. That really helps us a lot in many, many ways. And I appreciate your time. That's
Romina.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. This was such a fun discussion. Like Marlene said, pre-order, please. So Cazadora comes out on August 17th. It's the same day that the paperback of Lobisona comes out. So it's a great opportunity to pick up both. And my pre-order is pretty easy. It's just bit.ly/Cazadora pre-order. And then if you want to pre-order a personalized copy, then definitely go to my indie bookstore, Books and Books, and I want to give them a shout out. They're so supportive.
Mysterious Galaxy.
Yes. We couldn't do it without the support of our bookstore, especially this past year and a half. So yes.
Support your local.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Chris, what about you? Because you don't have what book's up next for you?
Right now I am working on Bryn in college. So these 5 books are her high school experience. So now I'm starting on her college experience yet. So they will be back at the Institute for Excellence with all the other dragons, and no release date on that yet. But this is just an interesting thing. I didn't really know about the Radish app and the Kiss app that people are reading on online, but now my Going Down in Flames books are all on the Radish app and the Kiss app. So if you're someone who has started reading on those, you can also look for my books there, as well as on Amazon or whatever place you might want to order it from.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much to each of our authors. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us. We have all the authors' websites are in the episode. I'm doing a podcast now. All the authors' websites are in the notes for the video on the YouTube over there, and please share it and send it around and check them out. Follow them on social media, and check out their work.
Oops.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Esther. Bye.
Thank you.